In our latest research, we find that 76% of tech leaders believe that AI will make low-code tools more efficient. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead and principal analyst for application development. I'm joined by Ray from Mendix. Ray, how are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me. So it's always fun to have a good conversation around app development, right?
Absolutely. I love the topic. It's what I focus on. It's what I deal with. But this is an incredibly important discussion because we're talking about AI. We're talking about the impacts of AI, what that means to low code. So, Ray, why don't you introduce yourself and introduce Mendix?
Yeah, so Ray Kok here. I'm the CEO of Mendix. If you would ask me what is Mendix, it's the leader in enterprise low-code platforms. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's also an MQ from Gartner. And if you look at Mendix, we've been really focused on how to turn low-code into enterprise. And what I mean with that is making sure that low-code is not just shadow IT, but it's actually a platform capability that enterprise IT can rely on and enable the marketization of app dev across the organization. So yeah, to me, it's all about how do we actually advance enterprise software development, and how do we actually democratize that across any type of business by using low code as a primary capability.
Oh, certainly, Ray. And with the explosion of application development across the industry right now, this is, low code development is very, very obvious that it's a very big area of evolution here. So in this episode, we're here to discuss that fast evolution of software development landscape, right? And the traditional code, as we know, is facing really these challenges, right? So we see the agentic AI and AI-assisted low-code, no-code tools are really not just augmenting developers, but they're really reshaping the very role of software creation. And when we look at this from an enablement of non-developers, that really are starting to contribute meaningful to digital transformation and shifting that competitive edge towards security, performance, and scalability. The rules of the games are changing really fast, right? We're seeing in our research, we're seeing how developers are looking to future-proof their careers and looking at the rise of fusion teams as a way of doing this, and also examining how platforms like Mendix are accelerating the AI-assisted development for both the professional developers as well as the citizen developers as well. So Ray, I'd love to kind of get your perspective here, because we were talking a little bit before this podcast. We had a briefing, and you were sharing all the latest announcements around Mendix. But one of the things that we were talking about was the death of the traditional coding environments, and developers are at risk. What are your thoughts around this? I know that's an interesting point here.
Yeah. So what I'm observing is that software engineering is undergoing a lot of change at the moment. So to your point, because of AI actually being pretty good at it, right? So if you think about software development, just from a practical skill set point of view, it's obviously how do you actually turn code into a workable solution and a production-ready solution. And so the reason that I see the big disruption, the big disruption is like everybody else. AI is actually changing the game of software engineering. And so on the one hand, what you see, and you kind of alluded at this, is that AI is being added to what I call pro-code workflows, starting with the emergence of agentic IDEs, right? So how do you actually use AI and prompts to actually automate a lot of the tasks that you typically go through when it comes to some type of programming? But then the same is actually happening on the low-code side. So meaning low-code started with the foundation of model-based software engineering. So as opposed to code, use models to actually build enterprise software. Same is happening. So for example, at Mendix, like you see with the agentic IDEs, we're turning our IDE experience into also an agentic IDE experience where AI is actually driving major steps within the software development lifecycle. So why does that matter? Well, it begs the question, okay, the basic skill sets that people typically use as a foundation to pick up a career in software development, meaning, for example, computer science, is that actually still relevant? Because if programming, the skill set, and the fundamentals behind that are actually taken over by AI, okay, so what is it that I'm going to instead focus on, right? So my point is, software development and the basic fundamentals of having programming skills are to, yeah, they're not going to be as relevant as what they are right now.
Well, Ray, I would say to take your words, right, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but traditional software engineering as we know it is basically dead. It's driven by agentic AI. And part of the data behind this is we see that 6.1% of U.S. computer science undergrads are unemployed. That's more than double that of art majors and art and history majors. And so how urgent is it for developers really to adapt to these new skills in this model?
Yeah, I think the figure speaks for itself, right? So I think very urgent. And so if you look at, for example, what is happening with software engineers in my organization, you have to understand how to actually take advantage of AI in the software development lifecycle. And so first of all, yeah, it's urgent. And secondly, it's all about, okay, how do you make the best out of using these tools and actually build a next level skill set on top of this? Because what I'm saying is that what used to be the knowledge work of today is not going to be the same as the knowledge work of the future. And what I mean with that is knowledge work of the future, especially in software engineering, we're not going to be makers, we're going to be orchestrators. So meaning we're going to be orchestrating agents, and we're actually we're going to be much more focused on, does this piece of software scale? Does it have the right performance? So we're going to be much more focused on orchestrating the process and the non-functional requirements that must be met by whatever the enterprise software solution that you're building. And so that's an interesting shift, because a lot of people got measured on how good of a programmer are you, and now it's going to be how good of an orchestrator are you of these AI tools, and how well can you actually build the non-functional, so not the functional, but the non-functional requirements into whatever the piece of enterprise software that you're developing.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that up, because it's really a pivot in how the next generation of software developers are coming out. They're becoming orchestrators and pulling things together, and this is like really apparent across the board, right? We're seeing that there's a tremendous amount of growth in application development, right? What we see is 500 to 1,000 net new applications being developed just at edge locations alone. And this is really that impact to the rise of agentic AI and having the rise of the fusion teams, right? So AI is really empowering non-developers or non-professional developers to a meaningful way of participating in the digital transformation initiatives, right? So when we look at this, and I think this is where like our conversation really was interesting during our briefing, when we were talking about how fusion teams are redefining the role of the professional developer. And what do you see organization strategies really ensuring between collaboration between those technical experts and the citizen developers without compromising that quality and security and scale and scalability, but it's also governance for reliability and compliance as well. There's a lot that has to do with this in the citizen developer world, right?
Yeah, so maybe let me unpack that a little bit. So if you look at the traditional low-code market, there was already two factions. There was no-code and then low-code. And so no-code, to your point, is going to be dead. And what I mean with that is, especially with the vibe coding tools coming up like Lovable, etc., anybody can actually build some meaningful application. And so therefore the category of no coding tools that we saw in the market, they have a very short runway. Now, then if you think about low code, and specifically enterprise low code players like ourselves, I think we're in a good position. Why? Well, if you think about software engineers becoming much more of orchestrators and being much more focused on, okay, how do I build the non-functional requirements into my enterprise software? You need kind of, from our point of view, two things. One is you need to make sure that you have a development environment that actually allows you to orchestrate agents throughout the software development lifecycle. So that's exactly what we're working on. And secondly, you need a foundation that actually is focused on the non-functional requirements. So whatever gets produced, to your point, is it secure? Does it scale? Will it actually deliver across all the form factors that my business is asking for, the right user experiences? So if you think about the foundation that you want to have for the future, is really all of the good capabilities that you see coming up out of the agentic IDEs, but then married with an environment that then, to your point, allows you to deliver enterprise software in production. And this is not about functionality, it's about the non-functional requirements.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes an interesting perspective here, right? Because now you're allowing your citizen developers and non-professional developers to leverage non-functional requirements as a new competitive edge, right? You basically set up this AI automation routine for coding for those skills of non-functional requirements, such as the ones that you mentioned, like security, performance, reliability, and scalability. Those are all areas that are now becoming differentiators for developers. So when we look at these resources, what are we looking at from a perspective of certifications and frameworks that developers should leverage to really refine these skills? And how should IT leaders be, updating hiring criteria to identify the non-functional requirement expertise? I mean, this is a different perspective from a lot of traditional hiring practices.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're in an interesting situation where, I mean, as you know, if you would pick GPT-5 or any kind of advanced large language model, it will beat all the certifications that are out there. And so traditionally, we always measured people on skills and their ability to provide the right solutions to the answers that were asked. But I think we're now going to be in a world where you actually need two totally different things. One is you obviously need to master the AI tools that are relevant for your domain. That's a given. But secondly, you're going to be selecting people that actually, instead of giving all of the right answers, can actually ask all the right questions. Because if you think about AI is all about producing the right prompt. And so therefore, if I would be a leader in IT right now, yes, you want to have the proficiency in AI tools. Yes, obviously, you want to have engineering skills, especially software engineering skills. But instead of software programming skills, I think what is now much more important is to actually have people that can take NFRs, so non-functional requirements, functional requirements, and marry this into asking for the right prompts, so that ultimately the output that you're going to get is actually what you would expect, and you can put it in production.
All right, so that brings up a new kind of perspective, right? So if we're looking ahead and we're thinking about where organizations are looking to hire and just the core functionality, what core capabilities, from that, you mentioned prompt engineering to data fluency, what will determine which developers will thrive in an AI-driven future? And how is that different from what teams value just a short time ago, like 5 years ago? Like they were software developers building code, and now they're orchestrating. What's the difference here that we see?
Yeah, so the difference is being able to work on higher levels of abstraction, from my point of view. So if you look at people that use Mendix, it's first of all model-based software engineering. So it's not based on coding skills, but actually based on modeling skills, that you actually model the enterprise software that you want to go build. And so I think what we're going to go see, because programming is simply an output generated, you're going to see that the software engineers of the future are going to be where you would say currently the skills of a software architect are. If you think about a software architect, this is the person typically on your team very much focused on composition, reuse, non-functional requirements, the right tooling. So what I believe is going to happen is that those that are more and more specializing themselves to have what we would call now software architecture skills, that those will be the software engineers of the future. So would I hire today a great programmer? No. And I think that's, for the statistics that you were showing, actually already happening in the market. So I think what's going to happen is that a lot of leaders in IT and in general, people that are looking for the software engineers of the future are going to be much more focused on those people that can work on higher levels of abstraction, therefore the skills that you would typically find today being a software architect.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I want to kind of double click down on that, just because one of the things we talked about during the Mendix 11 briefing that we had, we talked about how it really brings AI directly into the low code development through features, right? And these new features, whether it's MCP or client modules, and other things that you traditionally would see this with a professional developer, these tools now are accelerating delivery and reshaping the relationship between the professional developer and the citizen developer. So now you're able to let the lines of businesses actually accelerate their own processes without having to have professionals doing the heavy lifting. Is that true, or is that?
I think that's very true. I like the statement that you make, because we always like to, you brought it up earlier, talk about the notion of fusion teams. So what is a fusion team? So instead of a Scrum team with just, for example, engineering specialists or IT specialists, you actually have in a fusion team subject matter experts from the business working together with technical specialists. And so that makes up the fusion team. They together work. They use Mendix as the low code platform to then deliver the enterprise capabilities that are being asked for. Now, what's going to happen is that two things. One is the composition of the fusion team is going to change. So per the previous discussion, we're not talking here now about lower level engineers. We're now talking about the architects working with the business. So that's one. And secondly, to your point, the business will be further empowered to execute major steps within the software development lifecycle. And I think those two changes are going to be pretty profound from my point of view.
Ray, this is really interesting, and I do think that a lot of organizations are going through this paradigm shift right now. We talked a lot about different elements and how the teams are kind of moving and evolving and changing. For closing thoughts, we talked about a lot. Where can the audience go to learn more about, how to get started on this, even if they're early in their journey, or even if they're very mature in their journey? Where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, so obviously our global website is always a good starting point, so mendix.com. And then obviously check out, you already talked about Mendix 11. So Mendix 11 is our latest platform release, very much focused on the discussion that we're having today. So meaning, how do you use agentic AI in your developer lifecycle to accelerate enterprise software development? And I think what people will find out is that this is going to bring major opportunity, and not major opportunity in the sense that we're going to take the traditional software engineers and push them further. It goes back to your question around the fusion teams. What we're going to see is even better alignment between business and IT, so that together they can actually deliver the pace that the business is asking for. So it's definitely worth checking out, and it's going to be interesting, right, where this is going to go, because I guess my final prediction here is that what we're going to see is that the pro-code community, so those focused on software engineering based on programming, and low-code, this will start to merge. And I think what we're going to go and find is that the merge point is where people will realize that in this new world of agentic AI, software engineering has to be based on model-based software engineering, because code will ultimately become the instruction that you send to the computer. It's not the right level of abstraction anymore for knowledge work and critical thinking.
Yeah, Ray, I definitely agree that one thing is certain is change is consistent, right? That's going to continue to happen. And I think that this is a great example of how organizations are going to move forward. Ray, I really appreciate your insights today. Thank you for joining me on this podcast and joining us today. And a big thank you to all of you who tuned in. We really do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, that wraps up this episode. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talent shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building it with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.